Welcome to Art Space 111. My name is Simone, and I am the gallery manager. I want to thank you all for being here to listen to our featured artist, Jim Malone, talk about his latest exhibition, Animal Crackers. Known for his works on paper of landscapes of the Big Bend region, Malone is one of the distinguished Texas artists who rose up in the 1970s era with akin to Robert Rauschenberg and Jim Dine. Malone is a draftsman who's worked in a variety of media and techniques over a career spanning 50 years. His exhibition, Animal Crackers, dazzles the viewer with bright pops of neon color akin to the big Texas sky, peppered with wild horses, whimsical birds, and land critters. His work goes beyond merely telling us what a landscape is, but instead shows us how he feels about these magical places through the compositions of his imagination. He blends sky, rock formations, while incorporating cutout animals into the work, giving his images an approachable but surreal flair. Malone is refreshingly unpretentious and works spontaneously. I have worked for months planning this exhibition, and seeing it come to fruition has made it one of our best exhibitions yet, and is such a comforting and poignant way to start 2025, which has been honestly anything but smooth. In this way, the fitting title Animal Crackers brings light and brevity into the conversation of art. Malone has participated in group and solo exhibitions such as the prestigious Whitney Biennial at the Whitney Museum of American Art, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Dallas Museum of Art, and other museums and galleries throughout Texas. We are lucky to be in the same room as this tour de force artist. Thank you, Jim. Can I get a round of applause, please? All right, so thank you, Jim, for taking the time to talk to our audience about the work, and let's get it started. So, you have a 50-plus span of a career as an artist. So, can you talk about how you got into art, and what did your practice look like in those early years? Make sure to mic whenever you're ready. Okay.
I don't really know how I got into art, but I remember doing it in high school, and probably my biggest influence when I was a kid was a TV show called Learn to Draw with some guy named John Nagy. And I used to watch this thing religiously, and he taught all the basics, how to use a pencil, how to use a shading stone, erasers, all kinds of various techniques, and he would lead you through drawing a scene and um, make it come to life. So I sat there it was only a 15-minute show, which was interesting. Things like that used to happen back in the old days. So anyway, that was my first instance, then high school art class and stuff like that. And then when I went to college, I took an art appreciation course that was taught by the printmaking teacher at the school I went to. And because I liked this teacher a lot, I began hanging out at the print shop and learning some of the techniques there, and learned a lot about different types of printing and stuff. And I think that's where I really got to know and like paper a lot, because we would have to prepare paper and make sure it was the right wetness and or dryness or whatever. And then when you put it on a plate and run it through the press, and you get to the other side and you lift that paper and there's an image there, it's pretty magical. And then you have to go back, of course, and correct all your mistakes. But other than that, it's really, really a fun process. And there's a lot of technique and craft involved, which I like a lot for some reason. I have no idea why. But anyway, that's sort of where my introduction. And then I came down here, mainly because my printmaking teacher had gone here.
So where'd you come from, Jim?
Upstate New York, around Syracuse, a little farming town outside those places. My dad was a farmer, and I worked on the farm for a long time, and really learned that I did not want to be a farmer. That's hard work. So anyway, wandered down here and figured I'd pick up a master's and go teach somewhere. Just got down here and wound up staying. I don't know, got jobs at museums and whatnot, and just tried to keep going and keep working. And consequently did. I mean, it just sort of, you make that kind of decision, even though you're not conscious of it, it sort of opens the way, and you just kind of follow your nose after that. So here I am.
Yeah. And, I would say you are a tough man to pin down in terms of medium. So what is it that draws you to mixed media work? And how do materials like spray paint, graphite, and gold leaf operate in the work? And when do you know when to use them? Like, when do these materials seem
An
fitting?
easy question, huh? These are the softballs, is that it? Geez, I have no idea. Well, a lot of it is a shortcut. The spray paint is easy once you kind of figure out you can do a lot with it, and you learn a few little tricks and kind of keep it going. I originally started using spray paint for canvas back in probably the 70s mostly. Excuse me. Anyway, I was doing shaped canvases and stitching and making them sculptural, stuff like that. And then I would paint them with spray paint, and the paint would build up on the nap of the canvas. I didn't use sized canvas, or prepared canvas, so it was just raw, and it would kind of lay up on the little fibers of the canvas, and got to really interesting effects and a lot of fun to use. And I discovered that there wasn't any aesthetic problem that you couldn't solve with a good can of iridescent purple. That was the magic formula. So anyway, the rest of this stuff,
Like, it feels like, honestly, it feels like you really went for it. Like, in terms of, the gold leaf and things like that. Like, when do those get incorporated?
well, about 10 years ago, a friend of mine gave me a bunch of gold leaf that she didn't need anymore and wasn't using, and so I let it sit around for half a year, and then finally decided maybe I'll just kind of stick some on one of these things to see what happens. And got to kind of like it. It's such a weird material because it's so light. I mean, it's thinner than cigarette paper, and you have to wear a mask, I found, because if you even breathe on it, it goes everywhere or somewhere that you don't want it. So anyway, I started fooling around with it and liked it because it's such a different surface from the paper, that it kind of solves a lot of problems in terms of filling up space mostly. But it also kind of opens the space in a funny way, because since it's iridescent or kind of sparkling and at odd, it kind of has a texture. Not really, but as you put it on, it acquires a texture because you're just starting out and you're not very good at it. So it's not going to lay flat, even though you try. But so all those little crinkles and stuff start to really perform magic tricks of activating that space and making the piece richer in more ways than one. And it's just kind of a fascinating medium. So it's interesting because it's not something you can get with a pencil. It's not something you can apply, although you are applying it, but it's not something that's like a crayon or a pencil or any of that sort of thing. So it becomes another technique, and each of these techniques kind of has a different quality, a different way to express things, a different relationship to the image itself, which is all really interesting to me. And sometimes you get good results, and sometimes it gets kind of slid out of the way and forgotten about. The other things, a few years ago, I was working in just black and white, and I kind of finished up a show here, and in which I had just started to use cutouts and stencils to apply bird shapes and other kinds of shapes to paint the drawings. And I decided, well, I've got to get out of this black and white stuff. It's just starting to bore me as much probably as other people. So I just forced myself to do color stuff. Use color pencils, pastels, Crayolas, anything that had color in it. And it became a lot of fun, so I kept doing it.
Yeah, and going beyond just materials, when you incorporate the animals in these landscapes, how compositionally are you working? Like you have like these little birds, but like this big steer, like located behind us. So how do you think about in terms of the way you're rendering these places and animals?
Another easy.
I mean, you went to the Whitney Biennial, so I had to.
It's easier than it sounds. Anyway, well, I don't know. I just got interested in I first of all got interested in the birds because of the previous show, using them a lot. And of course, birds are a nice symbol of freedom and all kinds of things. So it was fun to use those kind of images. And then I quite know what I was doing. I think that one over there is one of the earliest ones where I started to try to force myself to use color and
that's Wanders,
Yeah.
the image located. Okay.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so I started cutting out shapes, and I had a little book of horses and transferred those with tracing and stuff like that, and then cut stencils and drew around them and stuff. And I liked the effect. It really kind of worked out well. So
Yeah.
the animal thing just kind of grew out of that. And then later I realized I could just draw from any kind of magazine or photograph or whatever. I have a friend in New Mexico who loves to photograph animals and loves animals. And so he's got 4 or 5 trail cameras out in the mountains around Moriarty. And so every now and then he sends me images that he's taken off his little trail cams, and I started tracing those and putting them on an iPad and blowing them up a little bit, kind of controlling the size as much as I could. But it became more and more interesting. The hardest part is wild animals are always walking in grass and you can't see their feet. Then you have to make it up. That's the hardest part. But you just kind of do it and carry on, or do the best you can.
Yeah.
If one were a zoologist or something, I'm sure they'd find quite a few faults with these outlines and stuff that I've done.
Yeah.
But then I started using the stars and the black silhouettes, and that got to be more fun because you could kind of imagine these critters as constellations or something like that without literally being constellations. And the silhouettes work into the drawing so well because they're solid black, more or less. So you don't have to, you can just put them on top of anything and fit them in. And sometimes I put them in kind of thematically, like the drawing, the background has something to do with the animal that I'm making. And sometimes it's just whatever animal I happen to have ready to go.
Yeah.
I just stick it on
Yeah.
and figure out how to, where it's going to go and how it's going to relate. The thing that's nice that I'm not particularly, it kind of corrupts the ideas of scale and stuff. I like to work with like a large scale and then a small scale and not worry too much about how they fit together. There's something really interesting about that. And it kind of alters the space in a funny way in the two-dimensional plane. So it's all kind of, it's just play. Really, when you get down to it, you're just kind of fooling around and seeing what you can come up with.
And I think that really comes through in terms of color, composition. There's this magic that, like I said before, it's not so much the place, but like the way you feel about the place that really dictates the composition in these things. And something I feel that's really special about Art Space and our artists is that they are all from Texas and they all make work about Texas. And so can you speak a little bit about the locality of your work and how like the Chihuahuan Desert is so significant in terms of place?
Well, when I first came down here, I was really taken or bothered by more than anything. Because where I come from, trees are really fairly big. They're fairly high, 30 or 40 feet. Down here, you're lucky if you find trees that are 20 feet. When I went to TCU, all the trees up there, although very nice, makes the campus really pretty. They're also small. So it took me about 3 years to get used to the space here. It's just the relationship of the botany and the biology and the space around it. I used to go out to Benbrook Lake and just walk along the top of the dam, and which is kind of opened my eyes to the openness of the space down here. In upstate New York, where I come from, space is pretty tight. You're always, although, roads go through open areas and there's a lot of farmland where there's open skies and stuff, and you can certainly see the sky up there, but there's also kind of a bit of closeness and claustrophobia of the trees and buildings and stuff that is different than down here. But once I got used to this, I just became more and more interested in it and happier with it. Well, I guess that's one of the reasons I stayed. And then when Verlin Fisher and I first went out to Big Bend, I remember going down from down into a kind of valley from Marathon and the northern entrance of the park, which I can't remember. Dennis, what's it? Pay attention. What's it called? What?
Monet?
No, the entrance to the park right below Monahan's. Oh, Persimmon, yeah, exactly. What's wrong? Okay. Anyway, as you come down off of Persimmon Gap, which is the entrance of the park, it just opens up into an enormous space. It's just amazing. And so I think I was sold from that moment on. Every time I would go back, it was just as emotional as it was the first time. And then I got interested in the park and the geology of the park. I mean, there's all kinds of handouts and books, trail guides and all this stuff that you can acquire at any of the main stations, Panther Junction or wherever. And I just got more and more interested in it and learned more and more. And finally wound up taking a geology course at TCJC that included a field trip to Big Bend where the teacher took I don't know, 20 or 25 kids down and we did geology and actually looking at the rocks and the formations was so much more interesting than turning the pages of books and looking at pictures and stuff. I just got more and more interested in what that was all about and how it came to be and all that stuff. And the more you learn about that stuff, the better it gets.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, between just referencing significant rock formations and also like the stones, like those placards that are like really significant in your work, kind of show your attention to detail just in terms of rendering and drawing, but also to the space at large, I feel like. And so I just feel like that's something people really appreciate about your work. But another question I had was, what are your other influences? We talk about this, like you work with an artist for at least 6 months, probably planning an exhibition. So what music has infiltrated the work? Are there other writers or other artists that you kind of look to in times where of maybe frustration during like the, conception of this show and creation of it?
You know, the weird thing about Texas is that it's about 90% myth. And a lot of that gets translated, of course, through the arts and into the arts and stuff. So you wind up listening to people like Willie Nelson and Joe Ely and Jimmy Dale Gilmore and all those people who have either been born here or came here and start writing about about the myth, about what they think Texas is about. And I don't know that I could point to specific things, but it certainly has an effect of teaching you about the area without learning much about it. It becomes an emotional lesson rather than a intellectual or verbal lesson or literary lesson. So I don't know. I wish I had a clear line to throw you on how that all works, but I don't. But I like a lot of music, and I like the effect of music. Acoustics are so much different than visual space. Acoustic space is so kind of contained and so everywhere, where visual space is sort of linear and specific to a spot or something, or an object or a formation or whatever you want to look at. But the acoustic thing gets through better. You know, the songs get through, the sounds. I've read recently that the American Indians who first met European immigrants, undocumented, by the way, that when they came here, the Indians realized that they couldn't hear the stars. Implying, of course, that they did, and I don't doubt it. And 90% of, I feel, of making art is listening. You know, what does the universe need? What can you contribute? What can you, all those things involve listening and trying to find those ideas and images that make sense somehow. So that's what I've done.
Wow, Jim,
But-
thanks a lot.
Anyway, that's the thing. You've got to listen. You've got to ask the questions. You've got to listen for the answers. They're there, but they're kind of quiet. So you got to be paying attention. But if you go to the Big Bend or any other of the wonderful state parks that Texas has, you'll realize they each have an acoustic presence. They kind of have a volume of sound, an environment of sound that's unique to them. And as you explore that sound, you learn in a very profound way what those places are about. And it makes a little bit easier to express it, to depict them, or to make something that references them. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know, Jim, I think you do bring those little pieces of the universe that we all so desperately need to see. And thank you for your contribution to, no, for real, like not just, I mean, Texas is so lucky to have you. We are lucky to have you. And it has just been an honor to be a part of supporting you through this entire show. So,
Thank you.
yes.
You've been more than more than helpful.
Well, thank you for putting up with me.
Yeah,
With the 9 p.m. calls, I lost a painting. I didn't lose it, but yeah. Anyways, the drama. You've just been fantastic. I was talking with Jim about this artist talk, and we come to the conclusion that we actively envy and distrust anyone who could clearly and concisely talk about their work. So, in that vein, I think we're all in good company here. So, thank you.
yeah, if we really could talk about it or really could write about it, we wouldn't be making pictures.
Yes,
After
agreed.
I left school, I got a job, or actually I got the job before, of kind of working in the prep shop at what's now the Modern, but used to be the Community Arts Center. Well, it wasn't the Community Arts Center. It was just the Art Museum, Fort Worth Art Museum. And I was sort of filling in for the summer for a friend of Ed's and a friend of mine who went back to Chicago to listen to Paul Butterfield and get into conservation work. Anyway, so I met Ed at the Art Museum, the Art Center, because he was teaching at the time. They had a school there, and it's a pretty neat place. You could almost make a living there without too much trouble. And obviously Ed was real serious about his work, and I was pretty serious about mine at the time. And we just, kind of gravitated together. He came over to my apartment with some other people for a little party one night, and was kind of looking through my records very diligently, and learned that we both had a taste for blues and taste for other similar things. And so we started kind of hanging out together, meeting up and stuff. And eventually got a studio downtown in the 300 block of Main Street. And worked, well, we did a couple of projects together. We did a thing called, and while I was at the Art Center, we were also involved in the Tarrant County Annual. Some of you may remember that being a show that the museum put on every year, took in work from around the area, and eventually 5 states around the area. So we began to learn about people outside of Texas and stuff like that. And Vernon was teaching at Sherman College at the time and came down to see one of the shows and liked one of my pieces. And he introduced himself, and we started kind of talking and hanging out. I went up to visit him, and we developed a friendship over time. And then Vernon and I eventually, I don't know why, but we went on trips together. We went to LA together, in my little Datsun pickup. And on the way back, we stopped at the Big Ben because we'd both heard about it and what a great place it was. And it was.
All that drive, do you guys not have AC?
Do what?
No AC, just driving to LA.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
Okay, wow.
2-3 day trip. Vernon had met Peter Plagens, who was a writer and teacher at the time out there. So we went out to visit him, and he had a studio out there, and he showed us around a little bit and all that stuff. And we didn't really like LA too much because in the middle of the day, you could not see the mountains. It wasn't until about 3 o'clock when when the smog kind of lifted, that you could actually see where you were. It was a weird place, very weird. So anyway, we hung out there and visited Peter Plagens for a while, and then we decided to give it up and come back. And we had both heard about Big Bend, so we decided to take a little detour. And when we got to El Paso, took the road south and visited there. And our first trip there was, we were camping out because it was cheaper. Vernon had a 25-cent bedroll sleeping bag that his wife had bought in a garage sale. And I had one of those kind of touristy Mexican blankets that you can get, or you could at that time, for $10. And that was my bedroll and a space blanket. And so we camped out, had a great time. And eventually I dragged Dennis down there. The rest is history.
Well, wasn't it Vernon who'd come into your studio and either he'd hate it or really hate it? And that was like the barometer of which all art was measured.
Vernon was so funny because I don't even know why he would do this, but he would come over to the studio and volunteer his opinion, which I hadn't asked for, about the work. And eventually, after about the fourth time, I thought, if he doesn't like it, it's probably right on mark. So we kind of both did that to each other, I suppose, and actually greatly appreciated it because there was so little opportunity to get any kind of real feedback. There weren't, many writers or critics or even teachers that would you would be exposed to that could give you that kind of input. So we sort of had to do it ourselves. And it made a lot of difference in his work and my work too. But I don't know, you have to make it up as you go, I guess. It's just not any other way to tell. There was a time when I was doing sculpture, pretty big sculpture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the one I did for the Tyler Museum for a show over there. But a friend of mine had a map of Texas that had a little mark somewhere around Brownwood that said Geographical Center of Texas. And it blew my mind. I had no idea anybody even calculated stuff like that. So the more I thought about it, the more I kept ruminating about what to do with that knowledge. And I went out there and actually visited it. And there's a little tiny kind of roadside attraction of a little park there that has a little kind of like a ranger tower where you can go up and survey the surroundings. And it's on somebody's ranch who I'd met later. But anyway, that kind of made me decide to build a sculpture that had something to do with the center of Texas or the geographical center of something. So I built this pyramid out of paper, and it had Velcro seams on the edges, and it fit on a wooden frame. So I inverted it and hung it from the ceiling. And then below, I created a little pond that I built out of cardboard and then covered with tar, and just so it could hold water. So when you walked up to it, you could see the whole pyramid or the whole there was a drawing on the pyramid. I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry. You're gonna think it's just some nutty thing, but anyway, you can see the whole pyramid in the pool of water at the bottom on the floor. And somehow this made great sense to me, so. I showed it around a little bit, and it was at Tyler Museum and at the, I think at Amarillo Museum, and then Jim Searles put on a big show in Houston. And he just invited everybody to bring a piece, and I hung it up, which was kind of the best show ever because you had such a spread of work, stuff that was really, really top notch and stuff that was just kind of beginner. Searles made no judgment about anything. He just said, bring it in and we'll show it. So anyway, I went down there and we put it up, and it was a good landscape. This is kind of how I got into photographing landscapes and getting to all these images. Oh God, it's all downhill from there. But I used to go out to this to the dinosaur park in Glen Rose, and there was a little hill kind of above the park. So I went down there. I hiked up the hill with my camera and everything, and took pictures in the 4 cardinal directions, and then put those images on the sides of the pyramid, so that when you looked in, there was kind of a world and a sky and another plane of existence, I suppose. Anyway, another one I did was a kind of a crater shape. It was like this cup, only, and that was the paper part of it. It was about 4 feet high, and it had little bamboo sticks that fit into little sleeves on the side to help it stand up. And I put those same images on the inside of this crater. And then it worked out that there were like 12 different slides that I transferred to the paper in these wedge shaped pieces. And then I put the appropriate constellation in each section by punching holes in it with a pencil. So they're just small holes, and you can really see them when you were looking over the edge. But they kind of projected down on the floor. I put a light in the center, and so they projected down on the floor in the shadow of the crater. You had the zodiac signs along the border of the piece. And then I did a bunch of other variations that were not as good.
Yeah, we tried to show one of those, or we contemplated showing one of his sculptures from that era. So someday, because that would be.
Well, I have the pyramid, but the crater has been discovered.
I just want to thank you all for being here, for Jim, and always showing up. So thank you.